we've the privilege today to be having a conversation with Jim Fickess. Jim is a writer, editor, consultant, among many things, and that includes being editor of the Journal of Total Rewards, working with the World at Work, the Total Rewards Association. Jim, thanks so much for giving up your time to have a conversation.
Oh, Stephen, thanks so much for having me. This be a good way to start my morning.
I'm very glad to hear it. Well, I'm sure those people who will come to watch us in due course will gain an awful lot of benefit from it. I thought, as in the way of these things, just to warm us up, I might just ask you to chat a little bit about what drew you to the world of total rewards, compensation management, generally.
Okay. Well, I'm not an HR or total rewards professional by trade, by profession. I was a newspaper and news website journalist, and one of the things I did along the way was I went back to school mid-career while I was working, taking like one class a semester at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism out here at Arizona State University in the U.S. And part of that was doing some academic work that I hadn't done for many years when I was when I was undergraduate, and it really interested me. And then as I moved into retirement from the news industry, uh, this opportunity came up. The World of Work as a really good semi-retirement job, and it's very academically it's it's a relevant academic journal. So it gave me a chance to do some really academic type editing, reading a lot of research, like paper we ran published from you a quarter or so ago. And I really got interested in the field of HR total rewards. Um, I always believed in the philosophy when I was a manager in newspapers that if you hire the right people and you treat them well, they're going to work harder and do better work for you than you could ever force them to do. I mean, and that's part of the motivation to attract, retain, and motivate your workers, your employees, and this just kind of fit in. Yeah, it fit into kind of my view of the workplace. I know a lot of the newer surveys out there say that a company's mission is very important for potential job seekers as well as current employees. They want to work for someone who who's doing good in the world as well as doing well. And I think that kind of fit in with me really well with World at Work because it's one thing we strive to do is make the workplace do our little share of making the workplace better for the folks who are in it, and I think it benefits everyone.
That sounds marvelous. And as you rightly say, being able to do good as well as doing things better, that is a wonderful way, I think, to approach any field, let alone HRM and total rewards. And yes, the Walter Cronkite School, wow, that's a name to be reckoned with. So,
It's always if you're applying for a job, you always try to drop the Cronkite name in there. I was back enough far enough in the program where I got to meet Walter, and we'd have a few of us have lunch with me. He There was an annual presentation of the Cronkite Award for media folks in the U.S. And it was it's really a privilege when you're sitting there when you're sitting with a legend and having lunch with him, and especially kind of nerve wracking when he asks you a question and you better be on your toes and have a good answer. But yeah, it was a good experience.
oh, I can believe that. And actually, it opens up the way in which you were describing the notion of reward. Reward goes way, way beyond pay and even mainstream benefits. The reward through the people one interacts with, the stimulation of dialogue and development opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, I think this whole world of total rewards, clearly it's a term to be reckoned with. It was one that, as I recall it, World of Work really, even if World of Work didn't necessarily coin it, certainly made it something
Yeah.
within our world that people would reckon with. Something that people that aspire to be reward management, compensation management professionals do well to get to grips with. Given the array of academic work, of papers you read, you edit, could you give us your take on what we should understand by the term total rewards,
Okay.
and maybe the way in which it's evolved, since the
Yeah.
original definition?
Yeah. I'll give you a little bit of background. Well, World at Work was was originally, well, not originally, but before we adopted the name World at Work, it was the American Compensation Association. That's pretty straightforward. You're dealing with pay, and in the year I think 2000 or 2001, so it's somewhere around the turn of the millennium. The the um, the name of the organization was changed to World at Work, and later picked up the Total Rewards Association kind of subtitle in our name. And that's one thing we're trying to emphasize right now. Basically, and this is not an all-inclusive category. I think basically we break down total rewards in 5 areas as we try to determine the content we provide in publications, which is my part of the operation, as well as we have certification programs, education programs. So basically, it goes around 3 areas. First, of course, is compensation, and then benefits, and one of the areas we've been emphasizing for a while is well-being, and that well-being now is is more than just physical well-being. There's financial well-being, and in this next journal in the first quarter of 2025, we'll be running a paper based on the term career well-being, which is kind of a new term for me, but it would basically be development, employee development, career development. That's another one of our areas, and finally recognition. So the whole idea is you know I think it's looking at the employee as a whole person, and not just uh, back when I started, basically the only thing you ask is how much is this pay, and the whole concept, and there were benefits, but the whole concept of well-being, development, recognition, came later on. So it's really taking a holistic approach, I think, at the in play, which is the most effective way to do it.
Indeed. Well, I mean, thanks so much for telling us about that developmental journey, as well as helping understand the meaning of total rewards and the way it's evolved over time. I have to give away my vintage. I was around and I very much remember that transition from the ACA to Total Rewards World at Work. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a fascinating opportunity, as you say, to think differently about people. People had started embracing HRM somewhat differently. People, with people like Ed Lawler behind it, talking about
Oh yeah.
strategic reward. We engage with Ed quite a lot over the years on both sides of the pond, obviously. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that more holistic thinking is something that really is the measure of the way in which people involved interacting with people, and certainly now, as you say, career well-being in general, not just financial well-being, is a sound evolution of the term. So, with that in
If I may say something, Steve, I just thought of
mind,
something. You can kind of see the evolution. It just kind of struck me to see the evolution. As we earlier this week, we one of our a consulting firm sent in a study, and the title, on the press release about the study is that compensation is still important. that kind of shows you the evolution, because it was the one and only for so many years. Now it's still important. So that there's other factors out there.
Well, indeed. Yes, I think it is important that we don't lose touch with that notion that, hey, you got to pay the bills.
That's right.
I remember talking many years ago with someone who was working in a leading HR role with a major Australian-based financial services company. And he talked about a spin-off operation and said, we heard an awful lot about it's about different things than compensation. And we thought, well, that's it. Let's experiment with this. And he said, wasn't very long before many of the employees said, well, at the end of the day, if you're going to experiment with not rewarding us, then maybe we'll experiment with not coming to work.
Yeah, yeah, you have to. Yeah, you have to. You always have to make sure. In any business, when you're adding something that you're really excited about, you want to make sure you're not ignoring, your main part of business. It's like, oh, we want to add this feature. If you're building a car, you might want to add, some kind of navigation feature or whatever. You also want to make sure the car is still running. So it's a you don't want to lose your main focus, and a lot of businesses do sometimes, and that's not good.
Indeed, it's an easy trap, isn't it,
It
to
really is.
slide into mission creep and all that. Um,
Yeah.
so that now that we've kind of got a feel for total rewards, particularly the way in which they've evolved, but without losing sight of the fact that you still need to compensate people because they need to be able to finance their lives. If one thinks then about people who are learning about compensation management, what would be your ideas? What would be your advice to them as to how they then might start thinking, both theoretically but also practically, about this notion of total rewards?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I don't want to be plugging my organization, but I will. And that we do have a very extensive certification program, with different certifications. The main one being CCP, Certified Compensation Professional. There's also a global aspect of that, which my colleagues in our education and certification departments have recently updated to fit more of the evolution of total rewards. But I mean, and we aren't the only organization offering classes in education. I would certainly not. I'm a firm believer. You you use lots of sources to learn. I think that's one that's one avenue. I know a lot of at least in the United States, a lot of the HR TR professionals uh, kind of back their way into the profession. I know my son, uh, he also has a degree in journalism, wound up in corporate communications, and now found himself now through that experience worked his way into HR, and he's a HR director for a hospital on the Big Island in Hawaii. So he's landed very well, and oh, we go visit him at least once a year out there. But the whole idea is you bring a broad uh, uh, list of experiences with you. Learn as you go. Like I said, a lot of folks, especially even the real compensation professionals I've talked to over the years, say, "Well, I was an HR. We needed to come up with the annual pay raises or a merit pay plan or pay for performance." And I kind of liked working with the numbers, so I went into that. But I think with any field, you want to have a broad based understanding as you go in. uh, talk. One thing I found out, both when I was in my previous life and professional life, and now, is HR folks, and this is kind of a generalization, like to talk and like to share information. So pick their brains and see what it really entails. You know, we talk. I've been around longer than you have, Stephen. Talk about how long. I remember when HR was, at least in the United States, was personnel, and that was basically the personnel police department. Enforcing dress codes, enforcing behavior, things like that. And those days are gone. And but it's good to understand the background of how we got where we're at and why we're at where we're at. And if you don't, if that's just see if that area is for you. I know back in my days is when I taught a little bit as an adjunct at the university at Arizona State University too, and I'd have students come in and say, "Well, I really want to be a journalist, but I'm afraid to talk to strangers, and I have to meditate for 2 hours before I write." And I said, "You know, this probably isn't for you because you need to deal with deadlines. You need you need to really you need to really be able to write on deadline, talk with people. And there's like with compensation and HR, you're going to need to work with numbers at some form in the profession. But I just think people that I've talked to are interviewing over the years who are in HR and TR, they're really interesting people, and they have a lot of interest just outside of work. I think natural curiosity carries you a long ways.
Natural curiosity, you're absolutely right. Always be asking questions, seeing if one can develop new avenues. Those are really helpful and powerful thoughts. Thank you for that. It brings back to my mind two people from the world of writing, Stephen King on writing well, William Zinzer, the great William Zinzer,
Oh
write,
yeah,
got to write, and then cut it in half, and it'll be better.
that's right.
Keep the practical aspects alongside the theory. So, very, very powerful things.
Yeah, I know sometimes you forget the basics as a writer and editor. I'm rereading The Elements of Style, Strunk and White, which is the little thin book, which when I was graduating high school, going into college all those years ago, one of the neighbors gave me, because they knew I was just gave me that book as a graduation present, and I still have that copy, and it's pretty worn out. I have a couple newer ones, but just yeah, understanding the basics and making the basics work for you, and it's I'm rereading that. I'm thinking I've developed some bad habits over the last few years. I got to get straightened out.
It's always good to have those checks and balances.
Yeah.
And talking therefore about being able to access written material, clearly you've talked about the certified compensation professional program, but the whole wealth of resources World of Work offers, and in particular the Journal of Total Rewards. How would you recommend people who are learners make use of the journal? I think it's very special because it walks the walk between the academic world, the rigor, the whole notion of something being subject to referee scrutiny, but also it says, but we're in an applied discipline. And obviously, we can read our Academy of Management publications, or we can go for Human Resource Management Journal on this side of the pond. But actually, having the ability to understand, based upon how things are being applied, how we can then stand back and think. I mean, the title of the textbook that my video series has been complementing is Alternatives, Consequences and Context. Because with that strapline, we tried to say to our learners, you're going to make some choices. That's what strategy is about. And you need to work out what the consequences are. And that's where theory can help you as well as doing empirical research. But don't think that there's one size fits all. One of the issues we had with the early incarnations of HRM thinking was that, oh, well, the best practice, you need to think about the context. So you've got a wealth of information within your journal. What are the ways in which you think that learners might make use of that if they're a member, if they are able to access that information?
That's a really good question, Stephen. It's a good way to think about what I do. I'm glad to kind of put it in that through that prism. The whole one of the things we try to do, and we've really worked on like the past 5 years to really emphasize is is the relevance. And I hate to use the term real world because that's where you, but a lot of it is what does this mean to 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 our practitioners who aren't reading it as mostly are not academics, but are learned people in the profession. And I think yeah, the research, the research that backs it is extremely important because you can see lots of times you see the evolution through the research. Now the paper that you and Susan recently published with us showed the research toward uh, decisions in executive comp. You can't understand where it came from, the background. But I think the thing is, how can you put this to use? Uh, in one of our publications, World of Work Workspan Daily, we have uh, we have a little, not a little, but a sidebar type uh, uh, part of the article says key takeaways, like 1, 2, 3. Here's what you can learn, and that works really well with daily breaking stories. It might be a little bit more of a challenge with a quarterly journal that has an academic background, but lots of times I'll come back to the authors and say, this is really good information, and but uh, how would you communicate this to a practitioner who wants to know how to put this in play. And and sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes some folks get it more than others. And what's really helped, I mentioned the past 5 years ago, we started an editorial advisory council where we have academics from now it's really global. It's mostly U.S. based because we're U.S. based, but we have academics from Europe, uh, uh, Asia, South America on there, and we meet quarterly. But the big thing they help with is they know the people out doing the good research. We help recruit them. They help come up with specific topics for our quarterly. I mean, you published in our exec comp issue on third quarter. We're going to have first quarter of the next year of this coming year is going to be total rewards and employee engagement. How do you leverage your rewards uh, plan to help engage employees, which is obviously a big part of it. And but they help those folks. The academics help a lot by talking to their fellow academics because I'm not one, and saying, hey, we need to make this relevant. How can we do it? And that's sometimes it's totally adding to a paper. Sometimes it's repositioning information in the paper, and several times we've taken we use original research paper, original papers, but sometimes if we find a highly academic paper, um, we can try to recast it to have it be more relevant. When we were doing, oh boy, it's been a year ago now. I think we did a section of issue focused on total rewards in the gig economy, and we got this paper that was all about algorithms, and there was some interesting information once I ramped up and understood it, but it really didn't say how this could be used. So I talked to the authors and said, hey, can you provide that? And I said, oh yes, that wasn't the focus of that paper. So they totally redid the paper, and here's how you can use these algorithms to help with HR and TR and the gig economy is a whole different world out there. And then that led the paper, and then in the supporting context after it, they went in more to their research and the theories of algorithms. And I kind of wish I had spent more time and paid more attention in some math classes from one of them back in the day, because it got pretty steep. But it served a different audience, is what I'm trying to say. So we always have to keep who our audience is at the top of our mind, and it's as total rewards practitioners, and that's once you know your audience, then it helps you develop a focus for the articles. But I think that's a long answer, to your question, but I think to the way you can use it, and I think the one thing that we offer uniquely is, get find the relevant information in there, but also pay attention to the background and the context. So why that uh, why it has developed that way, that background gives you an understanding of how things are today, I think.